The rancher offered his Apache neighbor shelter. The next day she asked, "Is your offer still good?" John had lived on his ranch for many years. The wide open fields, the smell of fresh earth, and the sound of animals were all he knew and loved. The ranch was a simple place, far away from the busy towns and noisy streets. It was peaceful, but it could also be very lonely, especially when the weather was bad. Don was used to working hard every day, taking care of his animals and fixing fences. His life was not easy, but it was honest and steady. Not far from John's ranch lived Maria. She was a quiet woman, proud and strong. Maria was Apache, one of the Native American people whose families had lived on this land for generations. Her small house stood near the edge of the woods, surrounded by tall trees and wildflowers. Unlike John's big ranch house, Maria's home was modest and simple. It was her place of comfort, but it also showed signs of wear. The windows were old, and the walls seemed thin against the cold winds of the coming winter. John and Maria were neighbors, but they did not see each other very often. Their lives were different, and they kept mostly to themselves. John respected Maria's privacy, and Maria respected John's. They exchanged nods and friendly smiles when they met on the dusty road or at the small local store, but their conversations were short and careful. There was a quiet distance between them, not because of any bad feeling, but simply because life had taught them to be cautious. One late autumn afternoon, the sky began to darken with heavy clouds. The wind picked up, swirling leaves across the dusty road. John was outside, checking on the animals, when he noticed Maria struggling by her fence. She was carrying a few wood pieces to keep her fire going, but the cold seemed to slow her down. John could see the worry in her eyes as the first drops of rain started to fall. The weather was changing fast, and it was clear that a storm was coming. John called out gently, "Maria, you might want to come inside." "It looks like a bad storm's on the way." Maria looked up, surprised. But shook her head. "I'll be fine. Just need to get a little more wood." John frowned, knowing the winter could be cruel. It's not just cold tonight. This storm could last for days. Why don't you stay at my place?" "I have plenty of room, and it's warm." Maria hesitated. She was proud and independent. Asking for help was not easy for her, especially from someone she barely knew.
"Thank you, John. That's kind of you, but I don't want to be a bother."
John smiled kindly.
"You won't be a bother at all."
We're neighbors. It's what neighbors do." There was a moment of silence as Maria looked around at the darkening sky, and then back at John. Finally, she nodded. "Psst." John watched as she hurried back toward her house. The wind was stronger now, and the cold was starting to bite. He hoped she would decide to come. That night the storm hit with full force. The rain pounded against the windows and the wind howled through the trees. John sat by the fire, thinking about Maria. He wondered if she was safe and warm. He tried to call her on the phone, but there was no answer. The power flickered and went out, leaving the ranch in darkness except for the firelight. John wrapped himself in a thick blanket and looked out into the night. The world outside was wild and fierce, but inside the ranch house, it was calm and safe. He hoped Maria knew she had a place to come to if she needed it. The next morning the storm had not yet passed. Snow had begun to fall, covering the ground in a thick white blanket. John could hear the soft crunch of footsteps outside. He opened the door and saw Maria standing there, her face pale and eyes tired. "Is your offer still good?" she asked quietly. John smiled and stepped aside to let her in. Bad. Of course it is. Inside the warm house, Maria began to relax. The cold and fear of the storm seemed to melt away. She was grateful, but she did not say much. John gave her a warm meal and a place near the fire. Rest. As they sat together, the distance between them started to disappear. The simple act of offering shelter had opened a door to something new, a connection between two people from different worlds, brought together by kindness and the storm. The storm outside showed no sign of letting up. The rain from the night before had turned into heavy snow, and it kept falling all through the day. The world outside John's ranch was covered in a thick white blanket, and the cold wind blew hard, shaking the trees and rattling the windows. The small road that connected John's ranch to the nearby town was now blocked with snow, making it impossible to travel. For John and Maria, the storm meant one thing. They were stuck together for a while. Maria sat near the fire in the warm kitchen, wrapped in a thick blanket John had given her. The warmth felt good after the cold she had faced outside. She watched the snow fall through the window and thought about how different her life was from John's. She had lived here all her life, on land her ancestors had cared for generations, but she still felt alone. The winter was especially hard. Her small house with its thin walls and old windows did not keep out the cold well. She often had to burn wood just to stay warm, but sometimes it was not enough. John, meanwhile, was busy around the house, making sure everything was ready for the long storm. He brought in extra firewood and checked the animals in the barn. Even though he was used to hard work and the challenges of life on the ranch, he felt worried about Maria. She was new to his house and to staying somewhere that wasn't her own. John knew that for her, accepting help was not easy. It meant trusting someone else, and trust did not come quickly between people who had lived separate lives for so long. Several times during the day, John went outside to check the fences and animals, dressed in thick clothes and boots to keep warm. Each time he looked toward Maria's house, hoping she was safe. The snow was falling faster now, covering everything in a soft, heavy layer. The sky was gray and low, and the cold air made it hard to breathe outside for long. Back inside, Maria stayed quiet. She was thankful for John's offer and his kindness, but she felt uncomfortable being a guest. She was used to relying on herself, not on others. Pride ran deep in her heart. She was a woman who had learned to be strong and independent from her family and her community. Asking for help was not something she did often. When John came back inside, he tried to make conversation, but Maria's answers were short. She smiled sometimes, but looked tired. The storm seemed to press on both their minds, making the room feel smaller than it really was. The silence between them grew heavier as the hours passed. Don decided to cook some food. He prepared a simple meal, stew with vegetables from his garden, fresh bread, and hot tea. The smell filled the kitchen, and Maria's eyes lit up. Food had a way of bringing comfort, especially in times like this. They ate slowly, the warmth of the meal bringing a small relief from the cold outside. After dinner, John brought out a few blankets and suggested Maria rest for a while. "You should try to get some sleep. The storm may last a day or two," he said kindly. Maria nodded but hesitated. "I'm not used to sleeping in a big house," she admitted softly. "It feels strange." John smiled gently. You're safe here. No need to worry." As the evening wore on, the storm outside grew louder. The wind howled through the trees like a wild animal, and the snow piled high against the windows. John and Maria sat by the fire, the flickering flames casting warm light across the room. It was quiet except for the crackling of the wood. In the quiet, John thought about how different their lives were, yet how similar they had become in this small moment. Both were used to being alone, working hard to survive on land that could be unforgiving. Both had felt the weight of pride and the fear of asking for help. But now, in this storm, they shared a small, unexpected bond. John told Maria stories about life on the ranch, how he raised the cattle, fixed the fences, and dealt with the challenges of the seasons. Maria listened carefully, occasionally asking questions. She began to relax a little, feeling that maybe this stranger was not so different after all. Maria shared some stories too. She spoke softly about her Apache heritage, how her people respected the land, lived close to nature, and valued family above all. She told John about the traditions her grandmother had passed down, the songs, the dances, and the lessons of strength and courage. John was quiet but interested. He had never known much about Maria's world, but now he felt a small window opening. As night deepened, the storm showed no signs of stopping. The power flickered and went out again, leaving the house dark except for the fire's warm glow. John lit some candles and placed them carefully around the room. The two sat together in the soft light, the storm outside a reminder of how vulnerable life could be. At one point, Maria looked at John and said, "Thank you for your kindness. It is hard for me to ask for help, but I am glad I did." John nodded, understanding more than words could say. We all need help sometimes. There's no shame in that. For the first time in a long while, Maria felt a little less alone. The storm had brought them together not just as neighbors, but as people who cared. The night was long, and the snow kept falling, but inside John's ranch there was warmth, both from the fire and from the growing friendship between two unlikely neighbors. As they both settled to sleep, each was comforted by the thought that when the storm passed, they would no longer be strangers. The world outside was cold and wild, but inside they had found a quiet place of safety and trust. The storm outside had grown even stronger by the third day. Snow was thick and heavy, blanketing the ground in white, and making the world outside seem silent and distant. The cold wind howled around the ranch house, shaking the windows and making the old wooden walls creak. For John and Maria, this was the hardest part of the storm. They were stuck inside with no way to go out or receive help from anyone else. Maria was feeling weak and tired. The cold had been very hard on her body, and even though she was safe inside John's house, her heart was heavy with worry. She thought about her home, now buried under snow, and wondered how it would hold up during such a long storm. She worried about her small garden, her animals, and the few things she owned. It was difficult for her to accept that she needed to rely on someone else for a while, even if that someone was kind and trustworthy. John could see that Maria was struggling. She did not say much, but her tired eyes told him everything. He watched her quietly, not wanting to push her too much, but wanting to help however he could. He knew that this was a test of strength for both of them, not just against the storm, but against their own fears and doubts. The days of being stuck inside together made the house feel smaller. The warmth from the fire could only do so much to chase away the cold that seemed to settle in Maria's thoughts. She missed her home deeply. Even though John's house was warm and safe, it was not her home. It did not have the familiar smells or the quiet spaces where she could be alone with her memories. One morning, John noticed Maria sitting by the window staring out at the snow. Her hands were wrapped tightly around a mug of hot tea, but she did not drink it. Her face looked pale, and there was a sadness in her eyes that John had not seen before. He walked over slowly and asked, "Are you all right, Maria?" She looked at him and took a deep breath. "I'm just worried about my home," she said softly. I don't know how it'll be when the storm ends. What if something is broken? What if I lose everything?" John nodded, understanding her fear. "The storm is strong, but your home is strong too. You have taken good care of it. Sometimes the land and the homes built on it are tougher than we think." Maria gave a small smile, but still looked uncertain. "I hope you're right." The hours passed slowly. Outside, the snow continued to fall, piling higher and higher. The wind whipped around the corners of the house, and the power stayed out. The cold was sharp and constant, making even small tasks feel difficult. John kept the fire burning, bringing in wood whenever he could. He shared stories to keep the mood light, telling Maria about funny things that had happened on the ranch in past winters. At first, Maria listened quietly, but then she began to smile and even laugh at some of the stories. For a moment, the storm and the cold seemed far away. But the hardest moment came late that afternoon. Maria had been trying to help with small chores around the house, but suddenly she felt dizzy and weak. She sat down heavily on a chair, breathing fast and shallow. John saw immediately that something was wrong. "Maria, are you feeling sick?" She nodded, but did not say more. John helped her to lie down by the fire, and he checked her temperature with a worried look. It was clear she was very cold and may be coming down with something. John felt a strong urge to protect her. He fetched extra blankets and made sure she was warm. He gave her hot tea and told her to rest. For the first time, Maria allowed herself to be taken care of fully. She closed her eyes and relaxed a little, trusting John to look after her. That night was difficult. John stayed awake, sitting beside Maria and watching over her. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside the house there was a quiet sense of care and concern. John felt something growing between them, a deep respect and a quiet bond that had started as neighbors but was becoming something more. As the hours passed, Maria's strength slowly returned. Desk, she opened her eyes and looked at John with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." John smiled softly. "You don't have to thank me. We're here for each other." The next day, the storm finally began to ease. The snow still covered everything, but the wind died down, and the sun peeked through the clouds. The silence that came after the storm was peaceful, but also full of unknowns. Maria felt stronger now, but she knew the hard work was only just beginning. Her home had faced the storm without her, and she worried about what she would find. Grasp. John helped her prepare to go back, packing warm clothes and supplies. Before leaving, Maria turned to John and said, "You saved me these past days. I don't know how I can ever repay you." John shook his head. "No need for that. Just knowing you're safe is enough." As Maria stepped outside, the cold air hit her face. The snow crunched under her boots, and the world looked bright and new. Breath. She looked back at John's house, feeling a mixture of sadness for leaving and hope for the future. John watched her go, knowing that this experience had changed both of them. The storm had been a test, not just of nature's power, but of their courage, kindness, and the beginnings of a true friendship. The storm had finally passed, but the world outside was still quiet and covered in a thick blanket of snow. The roads were blocked, and everything looked calm yet fragile under the cold winter sun. John and Maria stood together at the edge of the ranch, looking out over the snow-covered land. The storm had tested them both in many ways, but now it was time to face what came next. Maria's heart was heavy with worry. She had been safe in John's house during the storm, but she had not been in her own home for several days. Breaths. The thought of returning to her small house filled her with fear. What if the roof had leaked? What if the windows were broken? What if the storm had caused damage she could not fix alone? John could see the worry on her face and wanted to help. "We can go together," he said gently. "I'll help you check everything and fix what we can." Maria looked at him, surprised but grateful. She had been so used to doing everything on her own that the idea of accepting help again felt strange, but she knew she needed it now. "Thank you, John," she said quietly. "I would like that." They walked carefully through the snow toward Maria's house. The cold air was sharp, and their breath made soft clouds in front of their faces. The snow crunched beneath their boots as they moved slowly, taking care not to slip on the ice hidden beneath. When they reached her house, Maria opened the door with a key she had kept close. The inside smelled musty, and the cold hit them right away. The house was still standing strong, but the walls and windows showed signs of the storm's power. The roof had a small leak in one corner, and a window frame was cracked. Maria sighed, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. "It's not too bad," she said, "but it will take some work." John nodded and smiled kindly. "We'll fix it together. You don't have to do this alone." Over the next few days, John and Maria worked side by side. John showed her how to patch the roof with strong tarps and nails, and Maria taught John how to seal the cracks around the windows, using some traditional methods she remembered from her family. They cleared the snow from the porch and stacked firewood to keep the house warm. Working together, they shared more stories. Maria talked about the seasons in the Apache culture, the special times of the year, the dances, and the stories passed from one generation to the next. John listened carefully, fascinated by the deep connection Maria's people had with the land and their history. In return, John shared stories of his own family, his struggles raising cattle, and the lessons he had learned living off the land. He spoke about the importance of patience and hard work, and how the ranch had been in his family for many years. The work was hard, but the companionship made it easier. Maria found comfort in John's steady presence, and John admired Maria's strength and wisdom. They were no longer just neighbors. They had become friends. One afternoon, as the sun began to set behind the hills, Maria stood looking out over the snowy fields. She turned to John and said, "You have taught me that asking for help is not a weakness. It is a way to grow stronger." John smiled, feeling the truth in her words. "We all need someone to lean on sometimes," he said. "And sometimes, offering a hand is the best thing we can do." That evening, as they finished their work and prepared to say goodbye for the night, Maria surprised John with a small gift. She handed him a woven bracelet, made with colors that told the story of her people and the land. "This is for you," she said softly, brass, "to remember that we are connected." John accepted the bracelet with gratitude, touched by the thoughtful gift. He knew that this moment marked a new beginning, not just for Maria and him, but for the bond between their worlds. As the days went by, the snow slowly melted, and the land began to breathe again under the warm sun. Maria's house was stronger, safer, and filled with hope. John continued to check on her, stopping by with fresh food or a friendly smile. Their friendship grew quietly, built on respect, kindness, and the shared experience of weathering a storm, both outside and inside their hearts. The winter slowly began to fade, and the first signs of spring started to show. The snow melted away, revealing the green grass and blooming wildflowers beneath. The air was warmer now, filled with the fresh scent of new life. John and Maria had spent many days together since the storm, and their friendship had grown stronger with each passing moment. Maria's home was now warm and safe, thanks to the hard work she and John had done together. The small repairs to the roof and windows held well against the cold, and the firewood was stacked neatly, ready for the next winter. Maria felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the shelter John had offered during the storm, but for his kindness and support that had continued long after. John, too, felt a change inside himself. He realized that their friendship had taught him something important about trust and connection. Living alone on the ranch had been his way of life for many years, but now he understood how much richer life could be when shared with others. One bright morning, John and Maria met at the small store in town. It was the first time they had seen each other outside the storm's shadow, and both smiled warmly. They talked about everyday things, plans for the coming season, work on the ranch, and the small joys of life. But beneath the light conversation was a deep bond that neither of them could easily explain. Maria looked at John and said, "I used to think I had to do everything on my own. The storm showed me that it's okay to accept help and to trust others." John nodded. "And I learned that offering help is more than just kindness. It's about building community." Their words carried a quiet meaning. They were not just neighbors now. They were friends who had shared a difficult time and come through it stronger. Over the next weeks, John and Maria continued to support each other. John helped Maria prepare for the spring planting, sharing tools and advice. Maria invited John to join in a traditional celebration with her family, a chance for him to learn more about her culture and the stories that shaped her life. At the celebration, John felt welcomed and honored. The music, dances, and food showed him a world he had only glimpsed before. He listened carefully to the elders' stories, feeling the strength of the community and the deep connection to the land. Maria watched John with a smile. She was glad to share her heritage with someone who respected and cared. Their friendship had opened a new chapter for both of them, one filled with understanding and respect. As the year passed, their lives continued side by side. The seasons changed, and with them came new challenges and joys. But through it all, John and Maria knew they could count on each other. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, John and Maria stood together on the porch of her house. The sky was painted with soft colors, and the air was warm and calm. Maria turned to John and said, "Thank you for being there when I needed you most. You gave me shelter, but you also gave me hope." John smiled and replied, "And you reminded me that no matter how different we seem, we all need someone to lean on." Their story was not about grand gestures or great adventures. It was about simple kindness, trust, and the power of human connection. In a world that often feels divided, John and Maria had found friendship through the storm. Their lives were intertwined now, not by blood or history, but by the shared experience of helping and healing. And that made all the difference.